I'm Peggy, 60 years old, sitting in my parked car at a Walmart lot. 3 weeks ago, my son Jeffrey died suddenly from an undiagnosed heart condition. 1 week after his funeral, my daughter-in-law Amanda told me to pack my bags and leave. Her exact words were, "Don't be dramatic, pack your bags and learn to survive." So here I am, homeless at my age, grieving my only child. Before I continue my story, let me know where you're watching from. Please hit like and subscribe to hear how I turned this nightmare around. I spent most of my life as an elementary school teacher, a career I loved for over 30 years before retiring. My husband Robert and I had only one child, our son Jeffrey. Robert passed away 5 years ago from cancer, leaving just Jeffrey and me. We were always close, especially after losing Robert. Jeffrey would call me daily and visit several times a week. He was such a thoughtful son. Jeffrey was a successful architect who built a thriving practice in our city. He had a brilliant eye for design and a genuine way with clients that made his business flourish. I was so proud watching him grow into such an accomplished professional. At 38, he had everything going for him: a beautiful home, a successful career, and what I thought was a happy marriage. He met Amanda at an industry event 4 years ago. She worked in interior design, and they seemed perfect together, complementing each other's professional interests. When Jeffrey first brought Amanda home to meet me, she was charming, attentive, and seemed to genuinely care about my son. Their wedding was beautiful, and I welcomed her into our family with open arms. I was thrilled that Jeffrey had found someone to share his life with. 2 years after they married, Jeffrey and Amanda purchased a large house with a mother-in-law suite. They suggested I sell my home and move in with them. "Mom, it makes perfect sense," Jeffrey insisted. "The house has a perfect space for you. You'll have your privacy, but we'll be right there if you need anything." It seemed like the ideal arrangement. I was getting older, living alone in a house that had become too much for me to maintain. So I sold my home and invested $150,000 from the sale into renovating their house, specifically upgrading the mother-in-law suite and some common areas. Jeffrey had everything documented by his lawyer, making sure my investment was protected. At the time, I didn't think much about the legal details. He was my son, and I trusted him completely. The first few months of our living arrangement were wonderful. We had family dinners several times a week. Amanda would ask for my recipes and seemed to value my opinion on decorating decisions. Jeffrey looked happier than I'd seen him in years. I kept my independence volunteering at the local library and maintaining my own social circle while enjoying the comfort of having family nearby. But gradually, I began noticing subtle changes in Amanda's behavior. She would make small comments about how much space my things took up or how my cooking left too many dishes. Sometimes when I'd join them for dinner, she'd sigh quietly or exchange glances with Jeffrey. I dismissed these moments, chalking them up to the natural adjustment of sharing a home. More concerning were the changes I noticed in Jeffrey. About a year after I moved in, he started looking tired all the time. He complained of occasional chest pain and shortness of breath, which he attributed to stress and long hours at work. I urged him to see a doctor, but Amanda would interject, "He's fine, Peggy. Stop making him paranoid over nothing." Jeffrey's color didn't look right. Sometimes I'd catch him rubbing his chest or stopping to catch his breath after climbing the stairs. "Jeffrey, please see a cardiologist," I begged after one particularly worrying episode. "Your father's family had heart problems." "Mom, I'm fine," he'd assure me. "Just swamped with this new development project." Amanda would roll her eyes behind his back whenever I expressed concern. "He doesn't need you mothering him," she told me once when Jeffrey wasn't around. "He's under enough pressure at work without you adding to it." I started to feel like an intruder in their home, despite having financially contributed to it. I retreated more to my suite, trying to minimize any friction. Jeffrey was working increasingly long hours, sometimes not coming home until after I'd gone to bed. When I did see him, he looked exhausted. I made appointments with doctors that he never kept, always canceling at the last minute because of work emergencies. Looking back, I should have been more insistent. I should have recognized the warning signs. But I was trying so hard to respect their marriage and not be the interfering mother-in-law that I failed to protect my own son when he needed me most. The morning everything changed started like any other. I was in the kitchen making coffee when I heard a heavy thud from Jeffrey's home office. Something about the sound sent instant alarm through my body. I rushed down the hallway and found Jeffrey collapsed on the floor beside his desk, unresponsive. "Jeffrey!" I screamed, dropping to my knees beside him. His skin was gray, his lips tinged blue. "Jeffrey, can you hear me?" I shook him gently, then more urgently. Nothing. With shaking hands, I called 911, following their instructions to begin CPR while help was on the way. "Amanda!" I shouted between compressions. "Amanda, come quickly. It's Jeffrey." She appeared in the doorway, her expression shifting from annoyed to shocked as she took in the scene. What struck me as odd, even in that terrible moment, was how calm she remained. While I was frantic, tears streaming down my face as I pushed on my son's chest, Amanda stood watching, then methodically gathered his wallet and phone. "The ambulance is coming," was all she said, her voice steady. When the paramedics arrived, they worked on Jeffrey with urgent efficiency. I stood back clutching Amanda's arm, but she seemed stiff and distant. They loaded him into the ambulance and we followed in Amanda's car. The drive to the hospital was silent, except for my muffled sobs. Amanda kept her eyes on the road, not offering a single word of comfort. At the hospital, they rushed Jeffrey into the emergency room while we were directed to a waiting area. Hours passed. A young doctor finally approached us, his face solemn. "I'm very sorry," he said, and my world stopped. We did everything we could, but Mr. Mason's heart sustained too much damage. He had a massive cardiac event, likely the culmination of an undiagnosed condition. I collapsed into the nearest chair, wailing. The physical pain of grief hit me like a truck. My only child, my beautiful boy, was gone. Through my fog of anguish, I was vaguely aware of Amanda speaking calmly with the doctor, asking practical questions about death certificates and organ donation, while I sat shattered. "Didn't he complain of any symptoms beforehand?" the doctor asked. Before I could mention the chest pains and fatigue Jeffrey had been experiencing, Amanda quickly answered, "No, nothing. This came out of nowhere." I was too overcome to correct her, too broken to do anything but weep for my son. The days that followed passed in a blur of unbearable pain. Amanda took charge of the funeral arrangements efficiently, organizing everything while I could barely get out of bed. She chose an expensive casket and a large venue for the service-making decisions without consulting me. When I asked about certain details, my son's favorite music readings that would have meant something to him, Amanda brushed me off. "I was his wife, Peggy. I know what he would have wanted." The funeral was well attended. Jeffrey had been respected in his field and had many friends and colleagues. I somehow found the strength to deliver a eulogy, sharing memories of Jeffrey as a curious little boy who built elaborate structures with blocks foreshadowing his future as an architect. I spoke of his kindness, his laugh, the way his eyes lit up when he talked about his work. Through my tears, I promised to keep his memory alive. While I sat crushed by grief during the reception that followed, I noticed Amanda moving from group to group, engaged in animated conversations with Jeffrey's business associates. She seemed focused on making connections, exchanging business cards, discussing ongoing projects. There were no tears, no visible signs of the devastation I felt. I told myself everyone grieves differently, but something felt wrong. One of Jeffrey's oldest friends, Michael, sat beside me during the reception. "How are you holding up, Peggy?" he asked gently. "I don't know how to live in a world without my son," I confessed. Michael squeezed my hand. "Jeffrey adored you. He was just telling me last month how grateful he was that you moved in with them." "Was he?" I asked, hungry for any crumb of information about my son's final weeks. "Yeah. He mentioned he wasn't feeling great lately, though. Said he was going to get some tests done after this big project wrapped up." This was news to me. Jeffrey had planned to see a doctor after all. I glanced across the room at Amanda, who was deep in conversation with David Russo, Jeffrey's business partner. Their heads were close together, and for a brief moment, David's hand rested on Amanda's lower back in a gesture that seemed oddly intimate for a funeral. I pushed the thought away. Grief was making me see things that weren't there. But as people began to leave offering final condolences, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I just didn't know yet how terribly wrong things were about to become. A week passed after the funeral. I remained in my suite, lost in grief, barely eating or sleeping. Amanda hadn't spoken more than a few words to me since we returned from the funeral. I assumed she was processing her own grief, though I still hadn't seen her cry once. That morning, Amanda knocked on my door. When I opened it, her expression was cold, businesslike. "We need to talk, Peggy," she said, walking past me into my sitting area. She remained standing while I sank onto the sofa, exhausted from the simple act of answering the door. "I think it's time we discuss your living arrangements," she continued, her tone clipped. "My living arrangements," I repeated, not comprehending. "Yes, this was Jeffrey's house and now he's gone. I need to move forward with my life." I stared at her, uncomprehending. "This is my home too, Amanda. Jeffrey and I arranged." "Jeffrey is dead," she cut me off sharply. "And honestly, Peggy, your constant moping around isn't helping either of us move on. Don't be dramatic. Pack your bags and learn to survive. We all have to." Her words struck me like physical blows. I couldn't process what was happening. "But, my sweet, I put money into this house," I stammered. Amanda's laugh was hollow. "Do you have proof of that? Because all I see is a mortgage in my name and Jeffrey's. You were a guest here, nothing more." "Jeffrey had it documented. There are papers," I insisted. "Well, I haven't seen any papers," she said with a shrug. "And as his widow, everything belongs to me now. I need you out by the end of the week." "The end of the week," I gasped. "Amanda, that's just 2 days. Where am I supposed to go? All my things, my furniture, I sold everything when I moved in here." "Not my problem," she replied coldly. "Take what fits in your car, donate the rest, or I will." I broke down crying, the cruelty too much on top of my overwhelming grief. "How can you do this? Jeffrey would never—" "Jeffrey isn't here," she snapped. "And I need to sell this house. It's too big, too full of memories. I've already had interest from buyers." "Please," I begged, "give me a month to find somewhere to go, to figure things out." For a moment, something like guilt flashed across Amanda's face. Then it hardened again. "2 days, Peggy, or I'll change the locks when you're out getting coffee." She turned and walked out, leaving me stunned and broken. I sat there for hours, unable to move, unable to comprehend how my life had fallen apart so completely. My son was dead, and now I was being thrown out of my home by the woman he had loved. Eventually, the shock gave way to panic. I had nowhere to go. My small teacher's pension wasn't enough to rent an apartment without saving for a security deposit. Most of my savings had gone into this house. My closest friends had moved to retirement communities or to be near their children. I hadn't maintained my own household in 2 years. With shaking hands, I began packing what I could. Clothes, photographs, a few precious mementos. Each item I selected meant leaving another behind. How do you choose between your mother's china and your wedding album when both are pieces of your heart? That night, I heard Amanda on the phone laughing while I sat surrounded by half-filled boxes, trying to decide which fragments of my life to save my son's widow, was laughing as if nothing had happened. The next morning, I found a stack of empty boxes outside my door with a note, "For your convenience, anything left behind will be considered abandoned property." I worked through my tears, packing my car methodically. My old sedan could only hold so much. I prioritized practical items, then the irreplaceable photos and keepsakes. With each box I carried out, Amanda watched from the kitchen, occasionally checking her watch, as if counting down the hours until I would be gone. As I made my final trip carrying a small box of Jeffrey's childhood drawings, I had saved Amanda blocked my path back to the suite. "That's enough, Peggy. It's time for you to go." "But there's still—" I began. "Go," she repeated firmly. "Now, or I'll call someone to escort you out." I stood in the entryway of what had been my home, clutching my dead son's childhood art to my chest, and realized I had nowhere to turn. No home, no immediate family, just an old car filled with boxes and a heart full of grief. "Can I at least have my investment back?" I asked, a final desperate attempt. Amanda's smile was cold. "What investment? Prove it in court if you want. Good luck with that." I walked to my car in a daze, placed the final box on the passenger seat, and drove away from the home I had helped create. In my rearview mirror, I saw Amanda already on her phone, not even watching as I left. I had never felt so alone, so betrayed, so utterly lost. At 60 years old, I was essentially homeless, grieving my only child, and had been discarded like unwanted furniture. I drove aimlessly for hours, cycling through neighborhood streets, past parks and shopping centers, unable to form a plan. As darkness fell, reality set in. I needed somewhere to sleep. Hotels in our area were expensive, and I needed to conserve what little money I had. After driving past several parking lots, I finally pulled into a Walmart that seemed well lit and had other cars parked overnight. That first night in my car was surreal. I reclined the driver's seat as far as it would go, which wasn't far with boxes stacked in the back. I covered myself with a coat and tried to sleep, jumping at every sound. Cars arriving and departing, the occasional announcement over the store's exterior speakers, people walking past my windows, all kept me on edge. I maybe slept 2 hours total, waking stiff and disoriented. The practical challenges became immediately apparent. Where would I use the bathroom? How would I wash? Where could I eat that wouldn't quickly deplete my savings? The Walmart had public restrooms, but I couldn't exactly take a sponge bath in the sink with people coming and going. I found a gym with a monthly membership fee that was reasonable, about $30, and discovered they had shower facilities. That solved one problem. For food, I bought a small cooler and filled it with sandwich supplies, fruit, and bottled water. I ate sitting in my car, feeling like I was living in some alternate reality. How had my life come to this? Each day became a carefully choreographed routine. Wake up early before the parking lot got busy. Use the store bathroom to brush my teeth and wash my face. Drive to a local park to walk for a while, partly for exercise and partly to avoid staying in one place too long. Visit the public library where I could sit in air conditioning, use the Wi-Fi, and read without spending money. The library became my sanctuary during the day. Warm, quiet, with clean restrooms and free internet. I would find a corner seat and stay for hours researching affordable housing options. There were none looking into emergency assistance. Most had long waiting lists, and sometimes just losing myself in books to escape my reality. By the third day, a librarian named Sophia began to notice my regular presence. She was in her 40s with kind eyes and a gentle manner. "We see you here every day," she commented as I was checking out a mystery novel. "Are you new to the area?" I fumbled for an answer, shame keeping me from admitting my situation. "Just going through some changes and enjoying the quiet," I managed. Sophia seemed to understand more than I was saying. She started saving the most comfortable chair for me, occasionally bringing me a cup of tea from the staff room. "We library folks have to stick together," she'd say, referencing my former volunteer work. I never told her I was sleeping in my car, but I think she suspected something wasn't right. The physical discomfort was considerable. At 60, sleeping in a car meant waking with aching joints and a stiff neck. The summer heat made the car unbearable during the day, and I worried about the coming fall when temperatures would drop at night. I kept the windows cracked for air, which meant constant concern about safety. But worse than the physical discomfort was the emotional pain. I'd often break down crying alone in my car at night, clutching a framed photo of Jeffrey. The grief of losing him collided with the trauma of displacement and betrayal. Sometimes I'd talk to him, asking for guidance, for strength. "I don't know how to do this, Jeffrey," I'd whisper. "I don't know how to live without you, without a home." After about 10 days, the initial shock began to give way to anger. How dare Amanda throw me out after all I'd invested both financially and emotionally? What kind of person evicts a grieving mother? Had she planned this all along? The more I thought about it, the more I realized there had to be legal protections. Jeffrey had been meticulous about documentation. There must be records of my investment. I started researching tenant rights at the library, learning about unlawful evictions. I wasn't just a guest, I was a resident with financial interest in the property. But taking legal action required resources I didn't have. Most attorneys wanted retainers I couldn't afford. Still, the research gave me purpose. The anger, as uncomfortable as it was, gave me energy that grief had drained away. I started making notes, saving emails Jeffrey and I had exchanged about the house purchase, trying to build a case. I wasn't sure what I would do with this information, but it felt better than surrendering to despair. By the end of 2 weeks living in my car, I had established a routine of sorts, but I was exhausted. The constant stress of insecurity, the physical toll of homelessness at my age, the ongoing grief all wore me down to nothing. I lost weight, my clothes hanging loosely. I caught sight of myself in a public bathroom mirror one day and barely recognized the gaunt, haggard woman staring back at me. That evening, parked in my usual spot at the Walmart, I reached my lowest point. Rain pounded on the roof of my car, the sound deafening. Water began leaking through a window I hadn't closed properly. As I scrambled to protect my few remaining possessions from the water, something in me broke. I sobbed uncontrollably, big gulping cries that shook my entire body. "I can't do this anymore," I said aloud to the empty car. "I just can't." That was when my phone rang. I almost didn't answer. The screen showed a number I didn't recognize, and I was in no state to talk to anyone. But some small voice pushed me to press the accept button. "Hello?" I said, trying to disguise the fact that I'd been crying. "Is this Peggy Mason?" a male voice asked. "Yes, this is she." "Mrs. Mason, this is Marcus Wilson. I was Jeffrey's attorney." At the mention of my son's name, fresh tears welled up. "Yes, Mr. Wilson. We met at the funeral." "Mrs. Mason, I've been trying to reach you at your home number, but it's been disconnected. I've left several messages with your daughter-in-law, but she said you were unavailable." "She did." I wiped my eyes, sitting up straighter. "Mr. Wilson, I'm not living there anymore. Amanda asked me to leave shortly after the funeral." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "She what?" Something in his tone made my heart race. "She told me I needed to move out, that the house was hers now that Jeffrey is gone." "Mrs. Mason," he said slowly, "that is absolutely not the case. I need to meet with you as soon as possible. There are matters regarding Jeffrey's estate that we need to discuss urgently." "His estate?" I repeated, confused. "Yes. Jeffrey had a will and various other arrangements in place. You were supposed to be notified immediately. I sent letters to the house." His voice had taken on an edge of concern and something else, anger. "I never received any letters," I told him. "Where are you now, Mrs. Mason? Can we meet tomorrow morning?" I hesitated, embarrassed to reveal my situation. I'm staying with a friend," I lied. "But I could meet you somewhere." We arranged to meet at a coffee shop the following morning at 10 a.m. After hanging up, I sat in stunned silence, rain still drumming on the roof of my car. What arrangements had Jeffrey made, and why had Amanda concealed the attorney's messages? I barely slept that night, my mind racing with possibilities. By morning, I was a bundle of nerves. I used my gym membership to shower and put on the nicest clothes I had in the car, a simple blouse and slacks wrinkled from being packed in a box. The coffee shop was quiet when I arrived. Marcus Wilson was already there, a leather portfolio on the table in front of him. He stood when he saw me, his expression shifting to concern as he took in my appearance. I knew I looked terrible thin, exhausted with dark circles under my eyes. "Mrs. Mason," he said gently, pulling out a chair for me. "Thank you for coming. Can I get you something to drink? Something to eat?" His kindness nearly undid me. I hadn't experienced basic human compassion in weeks. "Just coffee, please. Black." When he returned with our drinks, he sat across from me. "Mrs. Mason, I need you to tell me exactly what happened after Jeffrey's funeral. Take your time." I recounted everything, Amanda's cold demand, that I leave her denial of my financial investment in the house, the 2-day deadline, my current homeless state. I tried to speak matter-of-factly, but my voice broke several times. Marcus took notes, his expression darkening. "Mrs. Mason, what Amanda did was not only cruel, but illegal. Jeffrey came to see me 6 months ago to update his will and make certain arrangements. He was concerned about his health and wanted to ensure everyone was protected." "His health," I interrupted. "He told you he was worried." Marcus nodded. "He mentioned chest pains, fatigue. He said doctors couldn't pinpoint the cause, but he wanted to be prepared just in case." My heart squeezed painfully. Jeffrey had been aware something was wrong even as Amanda dismissed his symptoms. "Mrs. Mason." Marcus continued opening his portfolio. "Jeffrey left very specific instructions. First, you have lifetime rights to the mother-in-law suite in the home. This is legally documented and cannot be revoked." I gasped. "Second, your financial contribution to the house renovation, $150,000, was properly recorded as giving you a percentage ownership in the property. Here's the documentation." He slid a paper across the table. There it was in black and white, my name, the amount, the terms. Third, and perhaps most significantly, Jeffrey left you as the beneficiary of his life insurance policy and a substantial portion of his business interests. Amanda was aware of all of this. I sent formal notification the day after he passed, and I've been trying to reach you ever since. The room seemed to spin around me. Why would she? I don't understand. Marcus's expression was grim. There's more, Mrs. Mason. Jeffrey had concerns about Amanda's relationship with his business partner, David Russo. He asked me to look into some financial irregularities at the firm. David Russo, the man who had touched Amanda's back at the funeral. We found evidence that funds were being diverted from the business. Jeffrey discovered this shortly before his death and was planning to confront them both. The implications hit me like a physical blow. Are you saying that Amanda and David were— We don't have proof of an affair, Marcus said carefully. But we do have proof of financial misconduct, and Amanda's actions toward you hiding legal notifications, illegally evicting you, suggest consciousness of guilt. I sat back in my chair, overwhelmed. What happens now? First, we get you proper accommodations immediately. No more car, he said firmly. I've taken the liberty of booking a hotel room for you starting tonight. Then tomorrow we begin legal proceedings to restore your rights and recover your property. Tears filled my eyes again, but for the first time in weeks, they weren't entirely tears of sadness. Thank you, I whispered. Don't thank me, Marcus replied. Jeffrey was my friend as well as my client. He would be horrified by what's happened to you. I'm just making sure his wishes are honored. As we left the coffee shop, Marcus carrying one of my bags, I felt a flicker of hope for the first time since losing Jeffrey. My son was still taking care of me even after he was gone. The hotel room Marcus arranged felt like unimaginable luxury after 2 weeks in my car. A real bed, a private bathroom with hot water, clean towels, even a small kitchenette. I took the longest shower of my life, washing away not just the physical grime of homelessness, but some of the emotional weight as well. Over the next few days, Marcus put his legal team into action. They filed emergency motions to secure my rights to the property and freeze any attempt by Amanda to sell the house. They also drafted a comprehensive lawsuit addressing the unlawful eviction, the concealment of legal documents, and my financial stake in the property. A week after our coffee shop meeting, we had a formal meeting scheduled with Amanda and her attorney. I was nervous, but Marcus had coached me well. Let me do most of the talking, he advised, but there may be a moment when you need to speak your truth. When that happens, don't hold back. The meeting took place at Marcus's office. Walking in and seeing Amanda sitting there perfectly put together in an expensive suit brought back all the pain of the past weeks. She barely glanced at me, her attention on her phone, until her attorney nudged her. Mrs. Mason, her lawyer began, we understand there's been some confusion about the property arrangements. Confusion is an interesting choice of word, Marcus replied coolly. Let me clarify the situation. For the next 20 minutes, Marcus methodically presented the evidence, my documented financial stake in the house, Jeffrey's will, specifying my right to live there, the registered letters sent to the house that Amanda had intercepted, and finally, the illegal eviction. As the evidence mounted, Amanda's composed facade began to crack. She whispered urgently to her lawyer, who looked increasingly uncomfortable. Furthermore, Marcus continued, we have evidence that Ms. Russo— It's still Mason, Amanda interrupted sharply. Not for long, I suspect, Marcus replied. As I was saying, we have evidence that you deliberately concealed legal notifications and financial documents from Mrs. Mason, which constitutes mail fraud. We also have reason to believe you were aware of and possibly involved in the diversion of funds from Jeffrey's architectural firm. At this, Amanda's lawyer held up a hand. These are serious allegations that go beyond the scope of today's meeting. They go to motive, Marcus countered. Mrs. Mason was evicted not out of legal right, but because she represented a threat to certain activities Ms. Russo wished to conceal. The attorney asked for a brief recess to confer with his client. When they returned, Amanda's composure had completely disintegrated. Her face was flushed, her hands shaking slightly. We're prepared to discuss a reasonable accommodation for Mrs. Mason, her lawyer began. I'm afraid we're beyond that point, Marcus replied. We're not asking for accommodation. We're demanding full restoration of Mrs. Mason's rights as documented by Jeffrey Mason before his death, plus damages for the unlawful eviction and emotional distress." Amanda suddenly slammed her hand on the table. "This is ridiculous. That house is mine," Jeffrey wanted. "Mrs. Mason," Marcus interrupted, turning to me, "perhaps now would be a good time to address your daughter-in-law directly." This was the moment he had prepared me for. I took a deep breath and looked directly at Amanda, the woman who had thrown me out on the street while I grieved my only child. "Amanda," I began, my voice steadier than I expected, "when you told me to pack my bags and learn to survive, I don't think you expected I would actually survive. You thought I would disappear too broken by grief to fight back. You were wrong." I leaned forward slightly. "My son trusted you. He loved you. And while I was sleeping in my car, crying myself to sleep every night, missing him, with every breath you were erasing me from his life, and possibly worse." Amanda's eyes widened. "Jeffrey kept records, Amanda, of everything. The money transfers from the business accounts, the text messages between you and David Russo going back over a year, his suspicions about his own health problems after meals you prepared." This last part was a bluff Marcus and I had discussed. We had no evidence of foul play regarding Jeffrey's health, but her reaction might tell us something. Amanda went pale. "That's a lie," she whispered. "Jeffrey never suspected." "Suspected what, Amanda?" I asked quietly. Her lawyer quickly intervened. "My client will not respond to unfounded insinuations. However, we are prepared to agree to Mrs. Mason returning to the residence while ownership details are sorted out." "The ownership details are already sorted out," Marcus stated firmly. "Mrs. Mason has a documented financial interest in the property and lifetime rights to reside there. Ms. Russo will vacate the premises within 48 hours. "That's absurd," Amanda exclaimed. "Where am I supposed to go?" The irony of her using the exact words I had spoken to her was not lost on me. "Not my problem," I replied, echoing her cruel dismissal. The meeting concluded with Amanda's lawyer requesting time to review our documentation. But the battle had clearly shifted. As we were gathering our papers, Amanda attempted one last attack. "He never loved you, you know," she hissed at me when her lawyer stepped away. "Jeffrey thought you were pathetic, clinging to him after his father died. He only let you move in because he felt sorry for you." I looked at her calmly. "If that were true, Amanda, he wouldn't have protected me in his will. He wouldn't have documented my investment in the house. My son loved me until his last breath and made sure I would be taken care of. That's what really bothers you, isn't it?" She had no response. 3 days later, a judge granted our emergency motion. Amanda was ordered to vacate the house, and I was permitted to return immediately. The judge was particularly disturbed by the evidence of intercepted legal communications and the circumstances of my eviction. When I returned to the house with Marcus and a police escort, a precaution he insisted upon, Amanda was finishing her packing. She glared at me but said nothing as she carried the last of her suitcases to her car. I watched from the window as she drove away, feeling not triumph, but a complex mix of sadness, relief, and lingering anger. The house felt different, empty of her presence, but still full of Jeffrey. I walked slowly through the rooms, touching his books, his collection of architectural models, the photographs on the walls. In his home office, I found a stack of mail that had been hidden in a desk drawer, several letters from Marcus that had never been opened. But the most significant discovery came that evening. As I was going through Jeffrey's bedside table looking for his reading glasses that I wanted to keep, I found a leather-bound journal. Inside, in my son's familiar handwriting, were entries dating back over a year. He wrote about his increasing suspicions about Amanda and David's relationship, his concerns about missing funds from the business, and most painfully his worries about his health. "Chest pains again today," one entry read. "Amanda says it's just stress, but I've made an appointment with Dr. Levine anyway, not telling A about it." Another entry, "Found more discrepancies in the quarterly reports. Almost $200K unaccounted for. Need to talk to Marcus about this." And most heartbreakingly, an entry just 2 weeks before his death. "If anything happens to me, I need to make sure Mom is protected. Amanda's been acting strange since I questioned the business accounts, making changes to my will tomorrow." I held the journal to my chest and wept, both devastated by the confirmation of betrayal my son had faced and profoundly grateful for his foresight in protecting me. Within the week, more developments unfolded. The financial investigation Marcus initiated revealed extensive fraud. Amanda and David had been siphoning funds from the architectural firm for over a year. Criminal charges were being considered. Even more surprisingly, several of Jeffrey's neighbors reached out after hearing I had returned. They shared observations about Amanda's behavior during our 2-week absence, including David Russo's car parked overnight multiple times, and a realtor visiting the house within days of Jeffrey's funeral. Most touching was the community that began to form around me. Jeffrey's friends and colleagues stopped by sharing stories about my son I had never heard. Sophia from the library brought books she thought I might enjoy and eventually became a dear friend. One of Jeffrey's clients, a contractor, offered to help make some improvements to the mother-in-law suite. In the midst of profound loss, I found myself surrounded by unexpected kindness. The home that had briefly been a place of betrayal and ejection became once again a sanctuary filled with memories of my son and new connections forged in the aftermath of tragedy. 6 months passed. The seasons changed, summer heat giving way to crisp autumn and then winter's chill. The legal proceedings against Amanda continued, but they had receded into the background of my daily life. The house was fully mine now. Jeffrey's will and my financial contribution ensured that once all the legal dust settled. With part of my inheritance from Jeffrey's life insurance, I created a memorial garden in the backyard, a peaceful space with a small fountain, comfortable seating, and plants that bloomed in all seasons. I would sit there often feeling close to both Robert and Jeffrey, finding a measure of peace in nurturing something beautiful from such loss. The most meaningful project, however, came from Jeffrey's journal entries about his heart condition. Working with Marcus, I established the Jeffrey Mason Foundation for Heart Health Awareness, focused particularly on young adults who might dismiss early warning signs. We partnered with several cardiologists to create educational materials and fund preventive screenings. It felt like the perfect way to honor my son, giving others the chance he never had. My friendship with Sophia from the library deepened. She had been such a quiet support during my darkest days, and now she became a regular presence in my life. We shared a love of books, gardening, and strong coffee. She never judged me for the weeks I spent homeless, instead expressing admiration for my resilience. "You're the strongest person I know, Peggy," she told me once. "Jeffrey would be so proud." Those words meant everything. Perhaps the most unexpected development was the support group I founded for older women facing housing insecurity. My experience had opened my eyes to a crisis happening invisibly around us seniors, particularly women finding themselves without homes due to family situations, financial hardship, or both. We met weekly in a community center sharing resources, offering emotional support, and in some cases, temporary housing solutions. One woman, Barbara, had been living in her car for 3 months after her landlord doubled the rent on the apartment she'd lived in for 12 years. Another, Elaine, had moved in with her son's family, only to be edged out when they decided they needed the space. Their stories echoed my own, and together we found strength and practical solutions. My relationship with grief evolved. The raw, jagged pain of those early days softened into something I could carry without being crushed by it. I missed Jeffrey every day, but I found ways to keep him present in my life, through stories, through the foundation, through helping others. The legal proceedings eventually concluded with both Amanda and David facing consequences for their financial misdeeds. The investigation never proved any connection between their actions and Jeffrey's death. His heart condition was genuine, if possibly exacerbated by the stress of discovering their betrayal. In a way, this was a relief. The thought that Amanda might have directly contributed to his death was too horrible to contemplate. I remodeled parts of the house, removing design elements Amanda had chosen and creating spaces that felt more genuinely like home. I kept Jeffrey's office untouched, though a sacred space filled with his drawings, his models, his books. Sometimes I would sit at his desk, running my fingers over the wood where his hands had rested, and talk to him about my day. Going through Jeffrey's belongings was a bittersweet process I did gradually, box by box, drawer by drawer. Each item held memories: his high school track medals, the architectural awards displayed on his office wall, the collection of smooth stones he'd gathered from every vacation since childhood. I kept what held meaning and donated the rest, knowing Jeffrey would approve of the simplification. As the one-year anniversary of his death approached, I reflected on the incredible journey from devastation to something resembling peace. I had lost my son, become homeless, reclaimed my home and my dignity, and created meaning from unimaginable loss. I had discovered strength I never knew I possessed. The truth I carry now is this family isn't always defined by blood or legal ties. Real family stands by you in crisis, holds space for your grief, helps you rebuild when everything has crumbled. My family now includes Sophia Marcus, the women in my support group, Jeffrey's friends who still check on me regularly. I also learned that proper legal preparation isn't just a practical matter, it's an act of love. Jeffrey's foresight in documenting everything and creating a will that protected me was his final gift. I've since helped dozens of women in my support group create their own legal safeguards, paying forward that vital lesson. Most importantly, I've learned that survival isn't just about making it through each day, though sometimes that's achievement enough. True survival means reclaiming your story, finding purpose in pain, and building something new from the ashes of what was lost. I think Jeffrey would be proud of who I've become. Some mornings, in the quiet moments before the day begins, I feel his presence so strongly, it's as if he's right beside me. "Well done, Mom," I imagine him saying. "You didn't just survive, you thrived." Have you ever had to rebuild your life after a devastating loss? What helped you find strength when everything seemed hopeless? Please share your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more journeys of resilience and healing. Remember to share with someone who might need to know they're not alone in their struggles. Thank you for listening, and may you find the strength to not just survive, but thrive through whatever challenges you face.